Hi, welcome back to section 4 of the Trixta tutorial series. In this video, I thought it would be a good idea before we get our hands dirty on the Trixta Flow editor to have a look and sort of discuss some of the different step types that we have at Trixta. So as you know, we can pull up the step library by clicking on the Add New Step button, and we can open the library from there. So let's talk about some of the steps we have here. Let's go in the order in which we see them. And the first step we find is the comment step. The comment step really just is a step that will be ignored when it's run. And to use this step, you drop it on the canvas and you can then leave a custom comment or a comment that you've written yourself. Just either with some information on what the following step is, what the previous step is, anything you'd like another developer to see when using that particular flow that you're working on there. Next up, we have the request for effect, and this step is a fire and forget step. What it will do is it will send a message to the role and moves on. It does not wait for a response. As soon as it sends the information, it's going to move on. And you'll typically use this step when you need to ask a role to do something and you're not necessarily waiting for a response. If you are ever waiting for a response or need a response, you can use the request for response step. Now, the request for response step asks a role for some information and it will wait for the response from the role. You'll use this step, as I said, if you do need input from a role before the flow continues on to the next step in the flow. Next up, we have the create update agent state step. And what this does is it simply adds data to an agent's profile. Now, you have to remember that this step works with a specific user and not everyone on a role. For example, we have the employees role, and I've got agents within that role, Mike and Warren and so on. This will update Warren's profile if I choose to update Warren's profile, not everyone on the employee's role. Next up, we have the raise error step. Now this step simply sends an error to the log, and you use this step because it's kind of useful for debugging or when you need to store specific information that would not usually be logged generally. Next up, we have the to-do. The to-do, like the comment step, is ignored when you run. It's mainly just a temporary placeholder that you can use in place of another step that you're going to be using in the future. So you'll use this, as a placeholder when you're planning a flow and, you're in the process of thinking what that step needs to do, but not really, sure which step you're going to use yet. So you place the to-do down. Next up, we have the race step. Now, the race step is a brace container step, meaning that when you place it onto your canvas, you can add steps within the race step container. And the race step is for 2 or more paths that will run in parallel until one of them finishes. When one finishes, all the other paths are then cancelled. Now, you'll use this step if you need to process a loop, but you don't want the branch to cancel the loop. So what you want to do is if you think of it as, what the word says race, when one path finishes, all the others will cancel and the step will then move on from that particular branch. Next up, we have the HTTP request step. Now, the HTTP request step is useful if you want to call an external HTTP URL. You'll use this as a request to get or to make a request to custom or to URLs with custom body and headers. Next up is the Slack post message step, and the Slack post message step simply says or does what it says on the tin. It sends a message to Slack, and you'll use this when you need to send information into a Slack channel. Next up, we have the broad consumer flow. Now, the broad consumer flow is used with Kafka as well as the broad producer flow. The broad consumer flow is to consume information in a Kafka stream, and the broad producer step is when you need to send data into a Kafka stream. Next up, we have the storage steps. That's remove, write, and read. You'll be seeing me using write to storage in the next video. Storage here is, think of it as Trixta database storage. If you want to write something to storage, you use the write to storage step. If you need to read or pull information from a database, you use the read from storage step. And to delete any lines in the database, you can simply use remove from storage. Next up, we're going to use talk about the run a Python script, which is the Python call step. And as I just said, that step is to run any sort of Python script that you may have. And you'll use that if you have a custom script that you'd like to run in Python. Next up is the sequence step. Sequence is also a brace container like the erase step. And this time, the difference here is that each step in the sequence is run one after the other in the order that you sort of set it in. It's useful for grouping similar branches of steps that can be minimized, and it doesn't actually change how the flow runs. It's simply going to run in the order in which you've placed them down. Next up, we have the enum each step, which is the enumeration step. And this is a loop for each of the values you provide in this step. And this is useful for when you need to iterate over an array of values. Next up is the loop step. The loop step is similar to sequence in that the sequence of steps is run repeatedly from top to bottom, with limits that can be used, that can be set inside the step settings. So you can set step settings for, to loop by time of day, just by time, by number of runs, when a value increases or decreases, as well as some other options that's available within the loop step as well. And then finally, we have the parallel step. Now, the parallel step is similar to the erase step, but not entirely, because the parallel step will run more than one branch in a flow simultaneously. And instead of the erase step, where when the first one finishes, it moves on, in the parallel step, all the branches must complete before the step moves on to the next one. And this is useful when you want to have all your branches run synchronously, and you want to wait for them all to complete before proceeding. So if you feel that I've gone too fast through the descriptions of the step types that we have, don't panic. We do have them, sort of listed in table form on the Trixta knowledge base. And you can find that in the glossary section. And then you can head to step types, the list of step types in the glossary section. And we've given you the name of the step, how we describe it, and what it's useful for on the table on this article. So, as we move to the next video, where we're going to start building flows, I thought I'd slide this video in here just to give you some sort of idea of what each of the steps in the flow editor does and how you can access them in the library as well. See you in the next video.